All right, back live tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. The ANC in Ekurhuleni says the city may be headed towards bankruptcy. The party, which is in a coalition government, or at least a government of local unity with others in the metro, is calling for more effective revenue collection, among other measures. ANC Ekurhuleni Chief Whip Ongizizwe Dlabathi joins us now in the studio for more on that. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you very much, and we really appreciate the opportunity.
One would have thought, being a government of local unity, which the chairperson of the ANC in Gauteng would have emphasized as a working relationship, these issues would have a platform where you would raise them and iron them out. When you come up and you speak as if you are not part of that government, it brings a question as to why you're defining yourself outside of that collective. Yeah,
not necessarily, and I really anticipated that this question will come. And I think we must understand that we have an ANC caucus, which is not necessarily the executive. Of course, there are some members within the ANC caucus who are forming part of this collaborative governance on specific portfolios. Be that as it may, it does not restrict the ANC caucus from exercising what we call political oversight on service delivery as well as governance matters. That is why we have decided to communicate publicly today about some of the pertinent issues that we believe are a point of concern, which requires us to pay more attention. Firstly, we have raised the issue of water, electricity, sanitation. Yeah. Wherein we strongly feel that we have not been efficient enough as a city to respond to some of the major queries. You'll recall that the area of Tsakane, Kwatema, Etwatwa, and partly Davidton, there were instances where for a number of days there was no water. And the question is that why we were not efficient enough to go on the ground, seek to appreciate the situation, and begin to provide that leadership and hope to our community members. There's been distortion. The city has not communicated in that regard as to what is the root cause. We've been speaking about the issue of finances, which is troubling. We're raising this because, Thabo, the ANC is having 78 wards out of the 112. And you can imagine that if there is any collapse on the financial part, it will have a dire impact on our ability to discharge our local government mandate. And so who takes accountability is the ANC.
Let's stick a little bit with that issue, because we explored it quite extensively, I suppose, here on the show of Tsakane Kwatema and the water challenges. The portfolio is handled by the EFF, and they insist that it's Rand Water who conceded that they have not, let me read properly, supplied us with sufficient water, not only affecting Tsakane but also other parts of the province as well. So they are saying it's not a problem that would have emanated from the city, but a problem that would have emanated because of Rand Water not supplying.
Yeah, we don't want to venture into a space of a blame game. The fact of the matter is that we carry the responsibility as local government to see to it that ultimately water is provided to our community members. Where there are instances of failure on the other part of the stakeholder, our statement is quite clear to say that the city's water department as well as the Rand Water must collaborate in an attempt to sort what may be an infrastructure problem, both at the level of Rand Water as well as the level of the city of Ekurhuleni. So we're calling for more collaboration as opposed to this blame game thing. We have noted, for instance, that some of the statements that are being uttered, they say the ANC-led Rand Water. That is not correct. Yeah. All that we need to do is to collaborate for the purpose of bringing water into our community members. It will not help.
There are a lot of intersections. It becomes a problem, not only Rand Water, ANC, but, for example, if one was to say the reason why there is no water is because reservoirs are not filling up because of load shedding. And that could be a mess that could be put at the door of the ANC to say, well, it's the ANC government that is running that state-owned entity that is creating this problem.
When the society is confronted with a challenge, political leadership should rise above petty politics, because at the end of the day, the society is expecting water, the society is expecting electricity. And all that we are imploring is that parties must collaborate in an attempt to ensure that ultimately water is provided. Because if we enter into that blame game, the ANC might as well blame the EFF for any failures. We don't want to venture into that space. And that is why we are decent and matured enough to say both the Department of Water as well as the Rand Water should collaborate and see to it that all the stumbling blocks that have caused that unfortunate situation where people did not have water for the longest of time, it must be resolved.
So interesting that, I mean, you've mentioned at least 3 times that people must collaborate. And why that jumps out at me, it's because when we were talking about the Tsakani Kotema issue, we had Councillor Makubo here of Action SA, and he was saying, well, the reason why there's no service delivery is because there is no collaboration. But he put it this way, he says there are squabbles within the executive, squabbles between the ANC and the EFF on issues of tenders and service providers and so on and so forth, saying MACO meetings are actually collapsing because of these infighting that is going on.
Yeah, well, we don't sit in the mayoral committee, and I really don't want to venture into commenting into a hearsay. All that we are saying as the ANC is that any collapse in the provision of sustainable services has a dire consequence into the ANC because we are leading the majority of the wards. And for that matter, people are seeking accountability from the ANC. And that is why we take a keen interest to confront the problem, make suggestions on what can best be a solution into the problem. All other speculations, really, I will treat them as a sideshow so that we are not detracted from focusing on what is core.
Okay, so what was behind the Tsakani issue? I mean, Tsakani, it was a little bit of to-dos. It was Kwatema, it was a Twatwa. There was another, they say it's a reservoir that is sitting there not doing anything. I think it's in Palm Ridge. There were issues in Benoni. I mean, as we speak now, folks in Bedford View are still saying there are taps that are dry.
From the brief that we have received, it does appear that there are a number of factors, one of which it relates to the infrastructure that must be able to pump and ensure that the water flows into the reservoirs. And that is something that we are saying it must be given attention to. There are also factors such as less rain, not enough water supply, and that is why there is an awareness campaign, I think, by Rand Water to try and implore all our community members to use water sparingly. So there are a number of factors. Hence, we are saying that let's collaborate. Where we need to play our part as a city, let's ensure that we play our part. For instance, we've invested into the construction of 29 reservoirs, effectively from the 2016-2021 term of office, because we anticipated the growing population and the need to increase our capacity to distribute water into different households. So we've done our part from the infrastructure building point of view. And obviously, where there are connectivity issues between ourselves and Rand Water, that is where we need to collaborate.
And the issues is even further than that. Apparently, there's also a challenge between your infrastructure and taking it into the households.
Certainly, hence I'm saying that where there are weaknesses on our side, the department must come on board and seek to repair so that we are able to enable Rand Water to then distribute water into our reservoirs.
Right. And so the reason why we are unable to do that, would you say, in terms of your checks and your balances, could come down to the fact that there are liquidity challenges?
Not necessarily. The issue of finances is a separate issue on its own, which borders on our view, on our ability to provide sustainable services. And we are raising an alert in that in the last fourth quarter report, we reported a 2.9 billion deficit. Yes, compared to a 1.5 billion deficit in quarter 3. Secondly is that if we look at our creditors, Eskom, Rand Water as well, we are owing them huge sums of money. For instance, Rand Water, the previous quarter, it was 745 million. In the fourth quarter, we are sitting at 800 million. Now, that is an alert because we are drifting towards a bankruptcy. And what does it mean? In context, it means that you will be constrained from providing sustainable services. You will have difficulties to embark on the repairs and maintenance as and when the infrastructure collapses. But generally, you will not be able to drive development in the city in order to grow the economy, create working opportunities. So we don't want to form part of an institution that is directionless in terms of development, purely because we are not focusing on improving our revenue.
Yeah. Why is a city failing to raise revenue? Because, I mean, I suppose the government of local unity would tell you that we've only been in this space for, what, 6 months now? And so some of the financial issues could also be legacy issues, probably, that they're inheriting from the previous administration.
Well, we must depart from that lazy excuse, because I can confirm to you, Brati, that between 2016 and 2021, we were running a financially viable city of Ekurhuleni. And for that matter, when we left government, the Auditor General South Africa can confirm that we were on a positive. We don't want to labor much on the history. Safe to say, all of us would have claimed that we are fit for a purpose. And all that we are saying is that there are certain basic things that we can do. For instance, we have collapsed the aggressive awareness on the ground campaign to promote the culture of payment. Because if you don't do that as the leadership of the institution, people are going to become complacent.
What do you mean we've collapsed?
I'm saying we have not embarked on an aggressive and regular campaign.
Why are you saying they've just abandoned the campaign? The
point I'm making is that there are certain things that we were doing. No, they don't require funding. They require leadership to be on the ground, interact with community members to raise the awareness about the importance of paying. Secondly, we are making a point that let's make our payment arrangement flexible, in a sense that don't make it difficult for a person who has a certain amount of money to plead to the institution to say, let me pay this and subject myself into a credit control. We are also saying that there is a need for us to shift from some of the traditional ways of generating revenue. You can no longer squeeze a household who is constrained by the economy, some of whom have been retrenched, but the disposable income is constrained. As you will know, that the consumer price index is causing problems. So we're beginning to say, let's shift our attention and venture into private partnership collaboration, wherein we are able to draw in investment into the city. That can also contribute towards rates and payment. And those are the basic things that we are saying we must implement.
State of service delivery in Ekurhuleni, the financial position of the city, the municipal program, and the failure of collaborative effort is firmly in the spotlight in our conversation. We have the Chief Whip of the ANC in Ekurhuleni, Ongizizwe Dlabathi, joining us in the studio. Where is the mayor in all this? I mean, we have been seeing a lot of challenges in the city of Ekurhuleni, but we seem not to be hearing his voice in any of these processes.
Well, I guess the mayor is around. Safe to say that I speak on behalf of the ANC caucus, and I'm sure if you want to get his views, you can extend.
No, I'm councillor, because I want you to say why you're not raising a motion of no confidence in the mayor. Because one, it's either it's a lack of leadership. If it's not a lack of leadership, then it's a lack of governance.
Yeah, well, any arrangement, you ought to give it the benefit of the doubt. And whilst we do so, we must not stop in raising issues, because as we raise these issues, we are actually igniting those that are seized with the responsibility to resolve those issues, to take it upon themselves to resolve. And we're hoping that the mayor is taking note of some of these issues that we are raising, in that he engages his mayoral committee to pay attention to issues of water, energy and sanitation, to see to it that we improve the revenue collection by putting in place an effective revenue enhancement, and also to ensure that all the parties into the collaborative government, they actually fully commit themselves into the implementation of the minimum program that we have agreed to, as articulated by him in the State of the City address, and to the extent that a provision was made in the budget statement. So
there are also, allegations of sabotage. The substation in Dawn Park, for example, is said to have been sabotaged, and there are many others as well. I mentioned the Bears Park in Pala Park area that had a substation blow up just last week. And, I mean, the allegations are that the ANC is obviously sabotaging the administration so that it fails.
In our statement, we are dismissing those allegations as unfounded. First allegation of a voice note that some aligned person to the ANC is benefiting due to the fact that the ANC has decided to cut water is fundamentally untrue. As I said, you can't sabotage yourself when you are in charge of 78 wards in the city of Ekurhuleni. It makes no logical sense. Secondly, we can't sabotage our own energy infrastructure. When it is us, we have made a point that one of the areas we must invest into is the energy infrastructure. In our statement during the budget speech, we said, for instance, we must add more transformers, we must add more substations. We strongly believe, Brati, that these are some of the well-orchestrated moves in an attempt, obviously, to discredit the African National Congress, but also to divert the attention from those that are directly responsible to see to it that the infrastructure is improved, protected for that matter. And of course, it's a period towards the 2024 elections. And we can't take it for granted that there will be many instances of sabotage, in particular water and energy. If you recall, in 2021, the people of Davidton had to go and vote when they were not having water and electricity. So some of these things, we do suspect them as a direct plan to sabotage the government of the African National
It wouldn't be the first time that it would be found that there are politicians who are officials who could be sabotaging and directly benefiting from this. In fact, not in Ekurhuleni, but for example, in KwaZulu-Natal, the South African Human Rights Commission in the province did its own investigation into the water challenges there. And they found that, for example, people who owned water tankers in some instances also happened to be politicians or well-connected within the governing party and were benefiting from those water tankers being rented. And so they would want to see a prolonged situation where the infrastructure is not.
We are outright as the ANC caucus that we must build internal capacity. In fact, in our submission to the minimum program, one of the things that we've articulated is that the city must buy its own water tankers so that in instances where there is a need to provide water, you don't rely on service providers to provide that. Similar issue with the energy. 60% of the work that ordinarily ought to be done internally, we have outsourced it to service providers. So we are very clear, let's build internal capacity inclusive of buying of the water tanks so that the city is able to respond. And we are not being accused that probably there is some person who wants to benefit. And that is the point that we've made today.
Yeah. Speaking of water tankers, where are the trucks, refuse trucks? Are they all still accounted for?
It was unfortunate that there was an allegation of trucks that were not accounted for. We did clarify that issue after inquiring with the administration. And we felt at that point in time it was prudent for political parties really not to make an immature statement, because till to date, all the trucks have been accounted for. In fact, earlier today, the MMC of Fleet has informed me that there's additional capacity that is going to be bring in around the issue of waste collection. So it was really immature at the time to insinuate that trucks were stolen and all sorts of things. You media have not followed up against those people who articulated those insinuations, because even today, no one can say that the trucks were lost.
So in your statement, you says we equally have the responsibility to ensure that we have a capable political leadership. That is interesting for me. Why? Because, again, there was a call during the Tsakane situation for the mayor to recall the MMC for water and energy. And Action SA was saying he lacks capacity. You are raising an issue of capacity in political leadership. What must be done about it?
Yeah, the context is that all those that are given responsibilities must see to it that they are able to perform. their responsibilities, because failure to do so, it has dire consequences on the quality of life that we're pursuing as the African National Congress. So we really implore the executive to do a self-introspection and really come up with interventions on areas where we are weak. And of course, we'll leave that to the executive mayor and his team. The other context to a capable institution is that we want a political leadership that thinks beyond the norm. Local government is not merely about water sanitation. Yes, those are critical things, but we are seized with the responsibility of driving strategic development. And as we have said in our statement, we seem to be lost in transition because we don't have a sense of whether we are pursuing some of these strategic developments. For instance, if you are operating in a constrained economy, it simply means that you need to be innovative enough to work with the private sector in order to bring development and boost the economy of the city, so as the revenue.
While you're there, what happened to the Aerotropolis? Has it been abandoned?
It's part of those things in our statement where we are saying we need to focus on them because there is a lull in terms of the flagship projects. You know, if you compare with the 2016-2021, you will recall that we spoke about 29 reservoirs, we spoke about 100,000 houses, 59,000 service stands, electrification of all our informal settlements, the Aqualip. So there were a number of flagship projects that were articulated over and above the normal things that we must do as local government. And that flagship project, including amongst others, the Retropolis as well as the 10-point economic plan, really brought in some investment into the city of Ekurhuleni. But at this point in time, there is a lull because there's no appreciation of what this political leadership is driving us towards insofar as the strategic development is concerned.
Yeah, and one of the other areas I think that would have been a key focus for us, at least when we spoke to the then mayor, was his attempt at land land expropriation. Yeah, that's the word that I'm looking for. He said, no, in Ekurhuleni, that will be the first city that will get it right, and you will expropriate some pieces of land and give it to people to build.
Yeah, well, I will not speak for the mayor on what he said. Safe to say that we are calling for efficiency in the release of the strategic land parcels so that we can draw investors into our city to invest in various aspects and opportunities that are provided by these strategic land parcels. Of course, the debate on the land question is a national debate. And subject to that debate being resolved at that particular level, it will guide us in that regard. Maybe the other issue I must just throw in is the issue of community safety, because we should not take it for granted. Yeah. We are calling for the enforcement of bylaw. And of course, that portfolio is under the ANC. And we are just demonstrating that even amongst ourselves, we are ensuring checks and balances and call for improvement in that regard. But safe to say that it will also need an EMPD department that is stable enough and not faced with internal contradictions.
Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. The Chief Whip of the ANC in Ekurhuleni, Ongizizwe Dlabathi. I'll be back with your headlines at top of the hour. Stay with us.